Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And we begin, as we usually do, with the economy. In November, consumer prices in China grew at a slower rate than anticipated, reaching a 5-month low, highlighting ongoing economic challenges despite recent monetary policy measures. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, which tracks inflation, increased by just 0.2% compared to the previous year, down from October's 0.3% rise, according to official National Bureau of Statistics data published today, Monday. This is official data, so take it with a grain of salt, but even so, this is already a very concerning rate. This result fell short of the 0.4% growth predicted by economists surveyed by US-based Bloomberg and UK-based Reuters. Food prices were the main driver of this modest increase, rising by 1% year-on-year. Within this category, vegetable prices surged 10% and pork prices rose 13.7%. So this is not the type of inflation that Beijing is looking for, and indeed if we strip out the food prices, we have a very concerning picture. Other sectors saw price decreases, such as home appliances, which fell by 3.1%, housing rents, which dropped by 0.3%, and vehicle prices, which decreased by 4.8%. This indicates that Beijing's nightmare scenario of falling into a deflationary cycle is intensifying. Since March of the previous year, China's CPI growth has hovered around zero, sparking concerns about deflation and weak consumer demand. Zhang Zhiwei, chief economist at Pinpoint Asset Management, noted that deflationary pressures remain significant and that while economic activity has stabilized, it hasn't rebounded strongly enough to drive inflation. He suggested that a more robust fiscal response is needed to pull China out of this deflationary trend. However, we have already seen months of fiscal responses. We will find out in the next few days at a critical meeting in Beijing whether Beijing will be willing to once again use its fiscal bazooka, even at the cost of surging debt. On a month-on-month basis, the CPI fell by 0.6% in November, following a 0.3% decline in October. Meanwhile, factory gate prices, measured by the Producer Price Index, PPI, dropped by 2.5% year-on-year in November. This marks the 26th consecutive month of decline and once again points to China's chronic overcapacity in manufacturing. Eric Zhu, a Bloomberg economist, observed today, quote, "With the private sector in weak shape, stronger government stimulus is required to spur a recovery in the economy and fend off deflationary risks." End quote. Next up, a quick update related to the Taiwan Strait. Over the weekend, between Saturday and Sunday, China deployed 14 warships, 7 military aircraft, and 4 balloons near Taiwan, according to a statement from Taiwan's defense ministry. This move comes as Beijing increases military pressure following Taiwanese President William Lai Ching-te's recent trip to Pacific allies, including stopovers in Hawaii and Guam, which we covered at the time. Beijing strongly opposes international recognition or exchanges with Taiwan, which it claims as its territory. Although the US does not officially recognize Taiwan, it remains Taiwan's primary supporter and arms supplier. During this latest incident, 6 Chinese aircraft crossed the medium line of the Taiwan Strait, a de facto boundary between Taiwan and mainland China. 1 balloon reportedly passed over Taiwan's northern region. President Lai urged China to stop its threats, stating that such military exercises fail to earn regional respect. Beijing, which views Lai as a separatist, has previously conducted large-scale drills around Taiwan in response to his remarks rejecting China's sovereignty claims over the island. Next up, we have one more big development to cover, but just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. Liking, sharing, and subscribing are all tremendous helps for the channel, and Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. I rely primarily on subscriber support to keep going, and this is a tremendous help. Thank you so much. everybody for the ongoing support. US President-elect Donald Trump has suggested that China could play a crucial role in negotiating peace between Russia and Ukraine. His remarks came after the sudden collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria on Sunday. In a social media post, Trump expressed concern about the ongoing conflict, saying, quote, "Too many lives are being wasted, too many families destroyed. If this continues, it could escalate into something much worse. I know Vladimir well. This is his moment to act. China can help. The world is watching." End quote. Later that day, in a US-based NBC interview, Trump mentioned his positive relationship with Xi Jinping, noting that they had communicated as recently as the past week. He claimed that during his previous term, he had convinced Xi to take a tougher stance on drug trafficking. When asked if fentanyl was discussed in his most recent conversation with Xi, Trump clarified that while it wasn't, they had talked about the issue in the past. He added that the Taiwan issue has also not come up in their recent dialogue, but they had discussed other matters. In November, Xi and Trump spoke for the first time since the election. As we have explored in previous videos, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, China has strengthened ties with Russia, calling their partnership No Limits. The Biden administration has accused China of aiding Russia's war efforts, though Beijing denies this. During his campaign, Trump promised to end the Ukraine war within 24 hours of taking office. In November, Trump spoke to Putin, urging him not to escalate the war. Trump claimed Ukraine is eager for peace, citing significant military and civilian losses, and called for immediate ceasefire. He also stated that Russia, burdened by its losses in Ukraine, has lost interest in Syria, while Iran is weakened by the conflict with Israel. Now, on these themes, over the weekend, Alexander Gaboev, director of the Carnegie Russia-Eurasia Center in Berlin, published a piece called "Can Trump Split China and Russia? Why Beijing and Moscow's Partnership Will Be Hard to Break." I wanted to end today's video by examining a few selected excerpts from the piece, which we quote now directly. "The one thing you never want to happen is you never want Russia and China uniting. I'm going to have to ununite them, and I think I can do that," Donald Trump boasted in an interview with the political commentator Tucker Carlson in October. Trump has never articulated exactly what his plan to ununite these two countries is, but early indications suggest that the coming administration might seek to damage the Chinese-Russian partnership by reducing tensions and even improving ties with Moscow in order to put pressure on Beijing, something like the reverse of what Secretary of State Henry Kissinger orchestrated more than 50 years ago, when the United States pursued détente with China to exploit the Sino-Soviet split. The school of thought seems to be popular with many people in the Trump universe, including those who have been nominated to his national security team. Michael Waltz, for example, advocated in The Economist for the United States to help wind down the war in Ukraine as soon as possible and then divert resources to, quote, countering the greater threat from the Chinese Communist Party, end quote. While Putin has reasons to be optimistic about Trump, Xi has plenty to worry about. During Trump's first term, he started a trade war with China, targeted the Chinese technology giant Huawei with sanctions and a pressure campaign to uninstall its equipment from allies' networks, and beefed up US military assets and partnerships in the Indo-Pacific. To Xi, the situation may look even worse this time around. In 2016, the Chinese economy was on a much stronger growth trajectory than it is now, and the US economy was anemic. Today, the tables have turned, largely thanks to Xi's own economic policies over the last decade. Then, there is the team of national security and trade professionals that Trump is assembling. Most of the senior officials nominated so far are known for their hawkish views on China, and they advocate for more defense spending to counter Beijing, as well as punitive tariffs, more export control restrictions, and support for Taiwan. To make matters worse, most of Trump's incoming senior officials are either completely unknown in China or haven't been to the country in years, spending time in Taiwan instead. Similarly, Xi's current team, particularly his top lieutenants on the economy, are not well known in Washington. China's greatest hope might be Elon Musk, who has multiple business interests in China and whose electric vehicle company Tesla has a factory in Shanghai, at least for as long as he remains on good terms with the US president. Amid all the uncertainty that Trump 2.0 will bring, the last thing that Putin and Xi are worried about is Washington's ability to orchestrate a real split between their countries, despite Trump's promise to do so on the campaign trail. First of all, whether Trump can negotiate a deal over Ukraine that satisfies Putin remains to be seen. If the Kremlin's core concerns aren't addressed, Moscow may keep on fighting. Second, Russia has become very dependent on China economically, with 40% of Russian imports coming from China and 30% of Russian exports going there over the last 2 years. This dependence is deepening, and it cannot be undone overnight. Reversing the dependence would also require coordinated efforts by Americans and Europeans to increase bilateral trade with Russia, which is hard to envisage under Trump. Finally, Putin and Xi know that this will be Trump's final term, and that he could easily be followed by a president who would reverse any deal reached under the Republican president. Both Xi and Putin, in contrast, plan to stay in power well beyond 2029, when Trump's term will end. Apart from the personal relationship between the two autocrats, their common mistrust of Washington and their hopes of becoming more powerful in an emerging multipolar order at the United States' expense are likely to provide a strong enough foundation to keep the Chinese-Russian partnership stable and growing. Here ends the direct quote and today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Monday, have a productive week, and I will see you all tomorrow.